The warning doesn't arrive as a red flashing light in a control room. It walks in the side door as a tweet. In the scrolling chaos of a December workday, a handful of engineers at Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power, KHNP, the utility that runs the Republic of Korea's nuclear fleet, start forwarding a link around. Someone, somewhere, is posting plant documents. Not rumors, not screenshots. Real files with real file names that match the shape of their world. System diagrams, procedural manuals, staff rosters, maintenance schedules. It looks like a prank until they open a PDF and recognize a drawing title block. No one should have this. At first, there is a shrugging optimism, the sort of reflex you develop in a high-reliability industry where panic is expensive. Maybe it's old material. Maybe it spilled out of a vendor's laptop years ago. Maybe it's the same public brochures wrapped in a scary headline. Then the posts continue. More archives, more specificity, and the tone shifts from "look at this" to "confirm this." Someone spots a training manual that's definitely not public. Someone else recognizes a layout that only a small circle would know. The chatter drains out of the room and is replaced by the quiet of people reading, very carefully, the worst-case scenario unfolding line by paragraph. Phones start to ring, not the emergency hotline, to a reactor control room. Those systems are steady and green. But the lines that carry politics and reputation, government liaisons, press officers, cybersecurity leads who suddenly have to brief their bosses before the bosses brief the ministries. On the internet, an anonymous figure rails against nuclear power and demands action. In inboxes across KHNP, fresh emails arrive with subject lines engineered to be irresistible and attachments booby-trapped to phone home. The messages mix two threats at once: the threat of what's already out, and the threat of what could still be taken. Inside the cyber response space, the shift from incident to campaign is visceral. Analysts pull up network maps and hunting dashboards. The first verdict is both relieving and unnerving. The operational plants are fine. Turbines are spinning. Neutron flux is exactly where it should be. And yet that relief comes with an aftertaste. The attacker isn't attacking the control systems. They're attacking the trust that surrounds them. They're playing for leverage in the court of public fear, rummaging through the company's intellectual attic for anything they can wave around like a torch. The demands start to harden. Shut down specific reactors, the anonymous accounts say, or we will keep publishing. Shut down by Christmas. The timing is theatrical, but the feeling isn't. Engineers who live their lives by procedural certainty suddenly find themselves subject to someone else's countdown. The conversation turns, as it always does in a modern incident, from "how did they get in?" to "what do we do now?" because the thing already happened. Now it's triage and truth-telling, to regulators, to the public, to employees who trusted their employer with their personal data, and now watch their names show up in places they were never meant to be. In the middle of that, a second mood takes root, a hackles-up resolve among the people who actually keep the plant safe. They understand a cruel irony of their craft, that safety systems are built to survive earthquakes and tsunamis and the worst that physics can conjure, but there is no interlock that trips on a rumor. So they do the work that doesn't trend. They hunt the email lures, rebuild infected office PCs, cordon off file servers, rotate credentials, call vendors, re-explain air gaps, and plan for the next leak as if it's inevitable. Because for the next few weeks it is. Tonight we're going back to those days in December 2014, when the South Korean nuclear operator learned the hard way that the most damaging nuclear incident in a digital era can begin outside the plant and unfold on social media. We'll stage the room tone of a utility learning that harm can come as humiliation, track the methodical fashion in which an adversary reached for leverage without ever touching a control rod, and sit in the cooler forensic register that tells us exactly which doors were left open and why. This is the KHNP nuclear breach, a case where power and politics, engineering and fear, all met in the fluorescent glare of a corporate office, not the charged quiet of a containment building. To understand why the KHNP breach landed the way it did, you first need to understand what a nuclear utility is and is not. It is not a handful of control rooms where serious people stare at glowing panels and push important-looking buttons. It is a nation-scale enterprise with a busy corporate nervous system, human resources and procurement, legal and communications, vendor management and finance, research and training, strategy and regulatory affairs. The operational plants, the reactors at Kori, Wolsong, Hanbit, Hanul, and their Shin-prefixed newer siblings are the beating heart. But that heart lives inside a body made of 100,000 unglamorous routines, most of them connected to the internet by necessity. South Korea's energy picture in 2014 only sharpened how sensitive that body was to public opinion. Nuclear power generated a fat share of the country's electricity, nearly a third, and did it with a reliability that industrial policy counted on. At the same time, Fukushima was not a fading headline. It was a live moral calculus in every nuclear nation. Korea's domestic debate was vigorous. Supporters pointed to energy security, export prowess, and clean baseload power. Critics pointed to governance lapses and the 2012 scandal over forged safety certificates for replacement parts, a metastasis of paperwork fraud that forced temporary shutdowns and embarrassed the sector. Into that climate, any whisper of nuclear and hack in the same sentence would never be just a technical issue. It would be a referendum. Inside KHNP, the systems mirrored that duality. The operational technology, OT, was treated with priestly caution. Control networks were segregated physically and logically. Reactor protection systems and safety systems were purpose-built, redundant, and paranoid, designed to assume failure and to fail safe. The digital control systems that lived alongside them were built to talk to known neighbors and no one else. Plant operators trained to muscle memory, drawing comfort from the fact that electrons and neutrons don't care how clever a phishing email is. You don't open a breaker with a macro, but that world brushes up against another. The information technology IT estate that makes any modern company modern. Office networks, email systems, collaboration tools, document management servers that hold everything from corporate policies to detailed training manuals, to plant drawings and engineering change packages. Laptops that travel to conferences, back to homes, and into vendor meetings. Accounts that bridge the company's multiple personalities, because one engineer works on a simulator project this quarter and a procurement committee next. If you've ever worked in a big organization, you know this landscape viscerally. It is productive, untidy, and necessary. In that mess, adversaries thrive. Not because the people inside don't care, but because a utility's mission doesn't slow down. A plant is mid-refueling. A vendor wants remote access to fix a quirk in a simulator. A new procurement system needs to be live by Monday to pay contractors. So exceptions get carved. And then the exceptions become habitual because the work never stops. Segmentation diagrams turn into guesses at the edges. Legacy machines that should have been retired last year survive because the replacement slipped. It is not malice. It's gravity. The breach matters because it showed how a well-resourced, politically motivated adversary can weaponize that gravity without ever touching the sacred center. It wasn't a Stuxnet sequel. It was something in many ways more unnerving. A campaign that avoided the heavy engineering risk of sabotaging a plant and instead pursued the lighter, cheaper, high-leverage path of humiliating the operator in public, sowing doubt about safety, and pressuring the company to make operational choices for political reasons. When a nuclear attack is an exfiltration of PDFs and an associated press campaign, your technical answers, the core is fine. The reactor trip logic is unassailable. Do not answer the question the public is asking, are we safe? It also matters because it revisited a theme every industrial sector keeps bumping into, the myth of the air gap. In boardrooms and hearings, air gapped is often tossed like a magic spell. Our plants are isolated. Our control networks are sealed. In practice, isolation is a spectrum, not a switch. There are maintenance windows. There are data diodes for one-way telemetry that sometimes aren't as one-way as you hope. There are control center workstations with dual homing for convenience during a refuel or a test. There are shared credentials that bleed across boundaries. The KHNP breach didn't pierce the gap. It simply reminded everyone that the gap was between the public imagination and how companies actually work. Finally, this incident matters because it's a playbook. It mixed cyber intrusion with public relations pressure and political theater. It was timed for maximum narrative power. It was tailored to South Korea's moment. When a nuclear operator wore a bullseye painted by international headlines, domestic debate, and the unresolved question of how much trust a high-tech society should put into the competence and goodwill of its institutions. The attacker knew that even the rumor of blueprints for a nuclear plant leaked online would be its own power source. The earliest steps leave faint footprints. Months before the posts, KHNP employees receive convincing emails tied to their work and interests. Some are crafted with details scraped from public resumes, or scraped from conference attendance lists. Others ape internal memos and supplier notices. The subject lines are prosaic: meeting minutes, budget updates, schedule changes, patch advisories. An attached document urges a click to enable content. Elsewhere, a compressed archive promises documentation that will help prepare for the next audit. In any large organization, even a 1% success rate is a torrent. Somewhere, someone double-clicks. Malware lands softly on a handful of office PCs. It's garden-variety remote access code, not an ICS-specific implant. It sits tight and phones home to a modest command and control server. Over days and weeks, operators on the other side test their reach, enumerate what they can see, and look for places where a few more privileges would turn a foothold into a staircase, harvesting cached credentials from memory. They try their luck against file servers and document repositories. They prod for shares named like candy: design, manuals, HR, projects. Sometimes they hit permissions denied. Often they don't, because work gets done by people who need to read things. The first data leaves quietly. A handful of archives, small enough to hide in the noise of a workday as normal. Churn are staged on compromised workstations and then trickled out via protocols that rarely set off alarms, or via cloud services that weren't unusual on a modern network. The attackers are choosy. They don't want everything. They want material that can fuel a narrative, an engineering training manual that looks scary to a lay reader, a plant system diagram that, while not a blueprint in the Hollywood sense, carries the appropriate gravitas, a personnel list that will create anxiety among families and, by extension, headlines, a sampling of emails that suggest a candid internal voice. It's curated humiliation, not raw dump. Then December lands and the public part begins. An anonymous persona, bluntly anti-nuclear in its pronouncements, starts posting archives and taunting captions. Social platforms and file-sharing sites become the stage. Each leak is presented as proof of systemic danger and incompetence, regardless of the underlying content. Early news reports strike the predictable tone. Hackers claim to have stolen blueprints. Threats to shut down plants by Christmas. Identity of employees exposed. The pace is deliberate, calibrated to keep the story alive in day-long drips that deny the utility. The relief of a single press cycle. Inside KHNP, the days blur into incident response loops. Infected office machines are identified and re-imaged. Mail filters are tuned on the fly to choke off lures that seem to come from coworkers. The security team does the exhausting work of enumerating what kind of data could plausibly have been accessed from the machines they know were compromised. Did those users have rights to the HR share? Which projects were they on? Which document libraries were mapped? Each answer informs two conversations at once: the forensic narrative for the record and the talking points for public reassurance. Government agencies lean in. South Korea's national investigators join the hunt, correlating network indicators with known tradecraft from regional adversaries, scrutinizing timestamps and metadata for clues about who is behind the keyboard. Political leadership asks a different kind of question. What do we say? Because in an incident like this, words are power tools. Say too little and it looks like a cover-up. Say too much and you provide a roadmap for copycats or help the attacker refine their campaign. The Ministry-S press corps prepares lines that will be recited for weeks. Operational safety is unaffected. The stolen material does not include control system secrets. The public need not fear a radiological event. These are true. They are also not sufficient to stop the story. The attackers escalate the theater, posting images of plant layouts and claiming, with breathless captions, that they can trigger a disaster. They threaten that if specific reactors are not shut down by a given date, more damning data will appear, as if screenshots of a training manual equate to live access to a control room. In the public imagination, fueled by cinema and Fukushima, those words hit the same emotional circuits. A rumor can be a sparking wire if you route it across the right nerves. In parallel, there's an effort to bait the operator into an operational misstep. A shutdown of a major unit is not flipping a light switch. It's a multi-day process with grid impacts and regulatory reporting. Even a precautionary power reduction to satisfy a political demand would signal that the adversary's leverage works. KHNP holds its line. Plants continue to operate safely. Maintenance schedules continue. The reactors do not take marching orders from tweets. It's the right call. It is also the call that keeps the incident in a long burn rather than a short-term blaze. More dumps arrive draped in hyperbole. Some include names and contact information of employees and contractors. The pace of internal work changes to accommodate the human cost. Hotlines for staff, offers of credit monitoring, briefings that try to strike a balance between forthrightness and speculation. It is one thing to talk about plant drawings in an abstract legal voice. It is another to talk to a frightened spouse at a kitchen table about why their partner, Wet-S data, is in the wild. At the end of the year and into early 2015, law enforcement starts to sketch a picture of attribution drawn from infrastructure, malware families, language artifacts, and the timing and political tone of the campaign. The conclusion that lands in Seoul AS corridors is unsurprising. The campaign bears the fingerprints of a North Korean operation, leveraging infrastructure outside the peninsula and mimicking styles seen in other regional espionage. Public statements roll out cautiously. In the background, quiet arrests and interviews target local accomplices who amplified the leaks or tried to insert themselves for clout. The legal system begins its slow grind, even as the internet's attention drifts. Strip away the drama and the KHNP breach is a study in two mundane truths. You can hurt a sophisticated organization by stealing unclassified but sensitive documents from its busy office network. And you can turn that theft into leverage by treating the public like your pressure plate. Everything that follows is an elaboration of those truths. Initial access was almost certainly spear phishing, emails crafted to be plausible, with booby-trapped attachments and links that seeded remote access malware onto office systems. The payloads weren't magical. In fact, their lack of magic was the point. A new backdoor makes headlines. A slightly tweaked old backdoor gets work done. Once on a handful of machines, the operators conducted reconnaissance the way good intruders always do. They asked the network who it was. Enumerate domain trusts. Look for file shares. Query for group memberships that reveal who might have privileges to interesting repositories. Scrape credentials from memory when possible, then reuse them to trade up to better vantage points. This ladder climbing is helped by the physics of corporate life. A project engineer needs access to a document library so the work can proceed. A manager has rights to multiple departments' shares because their job demands it. An IT service account can read across the enterprise because someone once needed to debug a thorny access issue at 2 a.m. The attacker pulls on those threads with patience. Exfiltration was pragmatic. Instead of a cinematic dump of terabytes, it appears to have been a selection of high-value items that could be moved quietly. In practice, exfil looks like this. Compress a handful of documents on the local machine, perhaps split them into smaller chunks, then move them over allowed protocols to infrastructure the adversary controls. Do that repeatedly, over days at a pace that doesn't trip volume-based detectors. Or, if the corporate network allows access to personal cloud storage from office PCs, use those services as staging grounds. Defenders hate this ambiguity because it blurs the line between an employee legitimately syncing a spreadsheet and an intruder staging a breach. What did the adversary take? Not core control system secrets. They didn't need to. Training materials that summarize system behavior. Plant layout drawings that, while not catastrophic if seen, carry an intimidating aesthetic to lay readers. Contact lists and HR documents that cause human harm when posted. Project documentation that looks sensitive and therefore is sensitive because of how it is perceived. A nuclear plant, like any critical facility, runs on textiles of information that wrap around the unyielding core of reactor physics. Those textiles are easier to steal and hurt in different ways. On the command and control side, the adversary used infrastructure that obscured origin. Servers rented in third countries, layered communications that complicated simple IP-based attribution, and broken Korean or looping rhetoric that may or may not have been an authentic tell. The malware families used in the initial breach showed kinship to campaigns focused on South Korean targets, but nothing in the code yelled nuclear. This is important. It means a team that previously targeted ministries, journalists, or think tanks can pivot to a utilities office network without learning ICS wizardry. The talent barrier is not as high as defenders sometimes wish it were. A key question asked by policymakers, the one with the most juice for fearmongers, was, could the attackers have touched the reactor? The answer in this case was no, and the reasons are engineering, not luck. In a modern nuclear plant, safety systems are purpose-built, redundant, and isolated. The protection logic that trips a reactor is not a Windows service. It lives in safety-rated systems designed to be stubborn about change and to assume that anything new is a fault. Operational control systems are separated from business networks by physical breaks, locked doors, and tight procedures. Yes, there are edges, a workstation with 2 network cards used during maintenance, a data historian that pulls plant information for analysts, a transfer process for software patches that involves removable media and human checks. But those edges are policed with an intensity born of knowing what failure would mean. In 2014 at KHNP, that discipline held. That doesn't mean the breach was harmless to safety. A skilled adversary can use stolen documents to shape social engineering inside the plant, to make future phishing more convincing, to identify external vendors with access paths worth compromising, or to map where a hasty defender might look least. Documentation that describes control logic in general terms helps an attacker craft better lies. But a drawing is not an exploit, and a training manual is not a skeleton key. There's a final technical dimension that deserves attention, because it goes beyond KHNP. The campaign intertwined cyber intrusion with an information operation. The attackers understood that press releases and public statements are part of the network. They carry state, latency, and error rates. They timed dumps to maximize coverage, salted them with claims larger than the underlying truth, and treated journalists as a functional part of their payload delivery. That hybridization, part data theft, part narrative warfare, is the defining signature of modern cyber pressure. It exploits the fact that very few organizations rehearse the "what if someone lies convincingly about our systems for 2 weeks?" scenario with the same rigor they practice rebooting a server. Start with the obvious: the lights never dimmed, no turbines tripped, no reactor cooled down because of a hacker's command. Every megawatt lost in South Korea that December was lost to normal life. That fact was both a blessing and a communications burden. It allowed KHNP to state honestly that physical safety was never compromised. It also compelled the company to explain, over and over, in patient and not always patient tones, why the words nuclear hack and plant drawings in the same sentence did not equal meltdown tomorrow. For the public, the impact was psychological. The idea that blueprints were online, however that word was used in the wild, conjured images of villains cackling over reactor schematics. Media outlets, primed by a season of high-profile hacks and a year defined by Fukushima's shadow, amplified the anxiety. Families of employees faced a subtler fear that personal information entrusted to their employer had been posted as bargaining chips in someone else's politics. Credit monitoring services became part of KHNP's response vocabulary. Town hall-style briefings for staff tried to balance candor with reassurance, explaining how exfiltrated documents fit into the company's work and, importantly, how they did not. For policymakers, the breach became a mirror. It reflected the vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure that were never exclusively technical. A nuclear operator looked unsteady, not because a containment dome cracked, but because a social account did. Ministries had to manage 3 messages at once: to the international community, that South Korea's fleet remained as safe as its export ambitions claimed; to domestic critics, that cybersecurity was not an afterthought appended to concrete; and to the operator, that state support would be there without blurring the line between regulator and regulated. The result was a weeks-long dance of assertions and qualifiers, enough to convince many but never all, because fear had momentum. Inside KHNP, the impact was measured in grit. Hundreds of office machines had to be inspected and, in some cases, rebuilt.
Email filters were overhauled.
Endpoint detection agents that previously felt like a slow rollout suddenly moved to must-have by Friday. Shared drives were audited, permissions tightened, and years of well-intentioned convenience untangled. Vendors were pressed to show their own cyber posture, which contractors had access to what, from where, and with what controls. Remote maintenance policies were revisited. USB drives used for patching non-networked systems were put through sterilization procedures that would have felt paranoid in calmer times and felt like common sense now. Reputationally, the incident left a scar because it reinforced a familiar critique that big institutions hide behind technical jargon to dismiss public anxiety. KHNP's engineers were telling the truth when they said the core was safe, but they were telling that truth in a climate where "trust us" was the last thing many wanted to hear. The breach hardened skeptics. Suspicion that nuclear operators had become too cozy with their own mythology of perfection. It also arguably hardened supporters' sense that anti-nuclear activism would hijack any incident for headlines. The middle ground, the people persuadable by facts and humility, watched both sides and made up their minds with an intensity no cost-benefit analysis can pivot. Internationally, other operators took notes, not because they feared the exact same playbook, but because they recognized the pattern. Adversaries don't need to learn your most technical secrets to cause national-scale discomfort. A utility in Europe looked at its document management system and asked unglamorous questions about who could read what. A vendor in North America reconsidered how many of its field laptops had cached credentials it didn't want to need. Regulators in multiple countries pushed for clearer, testable requirements around information security in the same breath as they wrote guidance for digital control upgrades. Standards bodies used the moment to nudge compliance-heavy cultures toward actual resilience, outcomes rather than checkboxes. There was also the quiet, long-tail legal grind. Investigations traced infrastructure, identified likely operators abroad, and nudged platforms to clamp down on the harassment component of the campaign. Domestic courts dealt with people who had amplified the leaks, with mixed motives and mixed consequences. The attribution that reached the public pointed toward the familiar geopolitical antagonist north of the DMZ, a state that has long used cyber operations to steal, extort, and make political points. That conclusion was both expected and galvanizing. It moved discussions of nuclear cybersecurity in Seoul from we should to we must. The first lesson is design agnostic. Hybrid pressure will be the norm. Critical infrastructure defenders must plan for campaigns that mix intrusion with public shaming, timed threats, and demands calibrated for headlines rather than operational leverage. That means incident response plans must contain not only the runbook for isolating infected hosts, but the playbook for telling the truth on bad days. Treat communications as a control. Rehearse it, staff it, build relationships with regulators and the press before you need them. In an incident like KHNP's, speed and credibility in public response are as vital as speed and accuracy in forensics. The second lesson is about informational blast radius. Document governance is cybersecurity. It always was, and now it is aggressively so. Operators should inventory the categories of documents whose public release would cause disproportionate harm. Personnel rosters, training materials that describe system design, plant layout drawings, and build compartments around them that are at least as strict as those that guard financial systems. Encrypt at rest and in transit by default. Implement attribute-based access so that need to know is not a courtesy, but a control. Bake auditing and anomaly detection into document access just as you do for privileged commands on production servers. Who zipped 10 manuals at 3 a.m.? Should be a question your SOC can answer without heroics. Third, raise the floor on user hygiene wherever it touches crown jewel information. Yes, multi-factor authentication and a modern, phishing-resistant approach to identity are table stakes. Yes, endpoint detection and response agents help catch common malware families before they become entrenched. But nuclear operators need a heightened norm for staff with access to sensitive information, even on the office side. Managed devices only. No personal cloud sync tools. Patch windows that are measured in days, not weeks for internet-facing software. And an intolerance for temporary exceptions that quietly become permanent. A lot of the KHNP story is the story of ordinary IT. Fix ordinary IT. Fourth, scrutinize the edges where IT meets OT especially when those edges are only used for data egress from plant systems. One-way devices should be tested as if an adversary were trying to weasel around them. Jump hosts should be as locked down and heavily monitored as your domain controllers. Removable media policies for the control environment should assume that a compromised office machine will try to poison anything that plugs into it. Patch management for engineering workstations and simulators should be treated as critical, not quaint. The point is not to relitigate air gaps. It is to engineer anti-fragility where reality compromises purity. Fifth, treat vendor access as the double-edged sword it is. Outsiders keep your plants alive. They also enlarge your attack surface. Demand the same identity rigor of them that you do of yourself. Hardware-backed authentication, just-in-time access, session recording, and revocation that is immediate and enforceable. Contract for cybersecurity behavior, not just deliverables, and audit it. The KHNP breach did not, as far as public accounts go, right of vendors' access into the heart of a plant. But vendor laptops and contractor accounts are where many office intrusions find their longest legs. Sixth, expand the notion of drills. Nuclear operators are world-class at practicing physical accident scenarios. Bring that culture, checklists, graded drills, surprise injects, into cyber and hybrid exercises. Run a week-long simulation in which a low and slow exfiltration coincides with staged leaks and a #war. Force the leadership team to make decisions about public statements with imperfect information. Force the plant engineering team to explain in plain language why certain claims are false without revealing details you can't reveal. Grade not just the technical team but the comms team, the legal team, the vendor management team. You only get fluent under pressure if you practice under pressure. Seventh, improve the international ballast. Nuclear safety has always had a transnational character. Operators borrow and lend lessons through the IAEA and industry bodies because the cost of secrecy is too high. Extend that ethic to cyber reality and reputational risk. Share indicators with peers. Share drafts of communication strategies. Share the warts, what didn't work in your last drill, which controls turned out to be theater. A KHNP-style campaign can play in any language. The defense should too. Finally, calibrate the political response. A campaign like the one that hit KHNP is not just criminal. It is political action by digital means. That puts it in a space where law enforcement tools are necessary but insufficient. Deterrence has to include cost imposition for the sponsoring state. The appetite for that cost will vary by country and context, but the principle should not. If the lesson adversaries take from KHNP is this works and we pay no price, we should expect more, not fewer. Incidents calibrated for narrative harm. Walk with me into the place, most people. Imagine when they hear nuclear hack, a control room glowing with instruments, and attention, and note what did not happen there in December 2014. No cursor skated across an HMI without permission. No reactor tripped because a script said so. No safety system blinked awake for the wrong reason. The work those rooms were built for held, because it is built for physics. The breach played out somewhere more ordinary. Office cubicles with their soft gray partitions, file servers with their tidy directories, laptops that travel home at night, and wake up in the morning to an inbox that is both the lifeblood of the company and the front door for the world. That contrast is the core of the KHNP lesson. In a digital century, the first move against a critical operator may not be to seek sabotage. It may be to seek shame. It may not aim to induce a trip. It may aim to induce a pause, a press conference, a moment of waffling where a politician wonders if they should call for a shutdown out of an abundance of caution. It may aim to force a nuclear narrative to dance to someone else's music. And because we built our organizations to be transparent inside, even when they are opaque outside, an attacker can sometimes learn enough to play that music without ever having to learn the math of a reactor. The call to action is therefore both humble and fierce. Humble, because the fix is not a miracle box. It is the boring, disciplined work of building compartments around the information that matters, of raising the floor on office IT, of tightening the edges between business and plant, to the point where a casual adversary bounces and a serious one has to work so hard that you see them. Fierce, because the stakes are not just regulatory scores, they are the public's willingness to believe you. When you say we are safe, on the very day someone is trying to convince them you aren't at T. If you are a nuclear leader, make 3 promises and keep them. First, promise that the same engineering pride that keeps your reactor steady will be invested in the systems that keep your documents and your people safe. Second, promise that when, not if, you face a hybrid campaign, you will tell the truth fast, without hedging your humanity behind acronyms. Third, promise that your company will practice the bad days so thoroughly that when someone shouts, "shut down by Christmas," your board already knows the difference between theater and risk. If you are a plant engineer or an analyst, take this incident as permission to care about the unsexy, care about who can read what on the share drive, care about old macros lingering in training documents, care about whether the laptop you use to draft procedures is managed like a domain controller or like a cafeteria kiosk. Care about what happens to the USB drives at the end of a refueling outage. Your craft is not diminished if you spend a day hardening the office. Your craft is honored. If you are a policymaker, build room for competence. Fund the cross-cutting work. Identity modernization, document security, vendor governance with the same seriousness you fund concrete and steel. And when the next KHNP-style campaign hits somewhere in the world, act like it's more than a public relations dust-up. Coordinate consequences and support. The measure of your nuclear posture isn't only how you talk about reactors, it's how you talk about people under pressure. The KHNP breach did not produce a plume or a siren. It produced a teachable jolt. An operator's reminder that safety is broader than physics. And that power in a networked society includes the power to make people doubt what they cannot see. The antidote to that doubt is not bravado. It is the steady accumulation of choices, architectural, cultural, and communicative, that make it harder to move you with rumors and easier to move yourself with confidence when you must. The anonymous accounts will always threaten to leak one more archive. Let them. Build so that the archive hurts less. Speak so that the public understands what precisely has happened and what has not. And work so that your engineers can keep doing the thing that matters most in the end, turning the invisible into the reliable. The day someone tried to make South Korea's nuclear operator dance to a stranger's tune, the plants kept humming. That is not an accident. It is an achievement. Make sure that in your house, on your grid, in your country, it will be true again.